I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of 3 projects that I've been directly involved in. One of them that is a little bit in the past, one of them that has only just completed, and one that is in progress at the moment. Because each of them gives, I think, a very different kind of view on what participation means. I was interested over the weekend, I won't go into detail why, but I was fascinated about the notion of the meme, which came up for some of us at the end of last week. And when I was doing a little bit of research into the meme, I discovered that there's been a very long history associated with the reuse of cultural content. Centuries, in fact. And this image I rather like because this I discovered was a very early version of a meme developed through the reuse and recycling of woodcuts in the 17th century. Indeed, 17th century English popular print. And I found something by Katie Cisneros, who describes how an early woodblock of ships morphed its way through some dramatic changes as it switched owners over the century, being used to illuminate broadside ballads, and the ships were re-emerging time and time again, each time in a different context and performing a different representational function. She describes how the reuse of these woodcuts in early popular print was an industry standard at the time. So I think there's been a very long history of reusing cultural heritage content, and we've been interested in these processes for a very long time. But of course the digital age has changed that quite considerably, not least the way in which copyright has entered these debates around open data and data sharing. And I'm not going to say anything more about that because Charlotte's going to talk about that later. But it does feel a little bit, for those of us involved in this work, that we've been sort of trying very hard to make digital cultural content properly open for free reuse for a very long time. And there are still, I think, a lot of challenges around what we can reuse, what the sort of licensing and other sort of regulatory frameworks are there for what we can use and how we can reuse it. And I'm drawn always to Melissa Terras, who I'm sure you know, who talks a lot about this and who's been arguing for a long time of the benefits of open data and encouraging the open data agenda within the cultural and heritage sectors. Because there's a huge amount of potential that exists for the study of culture and society when our data is made open, but we're not quite there yet. But because of the various processes involved, as all of you know, in the digital environment, not only the documenting of tangible and intangible cultural heritage, which in itself is a challenge, but also the way in which we use different data formats and standards, metadata, semantics, linked data, crowdsourcing and cloud, all of which come into play in different ways when we use and reuse the data, and which leads to copyright issues. So, and I'm also interested in this notion of remix, which is part of the whole kind of reuse agenda, which has also got a very long history of production, which again predates the digital age. It's tended to be associated with the digital, and what was once really tied up in post-production processes and product in popular music has become something that signifies all that is new, digital and participatory, or has become a sort of shorthand for many modes of digital expression. And it's a term that's used now more figuratively to refer to the recombination of existing expressions. So all of these sort of terms that we come to sort of use within this digital environment have actually been around for a very long time, but they're getting reused and reuse themselves as terms. Okay, so the first project I'm going to talk about will be very familiar to many of you, because many of you have been part of this project, Europeana Space. It was a very large consortium of partners. I had the great pleasure of coordinating this project. It ran for 3 years, it completed in 2017, and it had a very specific focus on reusing digital cultural content. We set up pilot activities in 6 different areas and several educational demonstrators. And very much focusing on developing new applications using pre-existing digitized cultural heritage content, drawn from but not limited to Europeana. So the aim of the project was, one of the aims of the project was to support new business and sustainability models around how new creative apps came out of the work, We organised to support that a series of hackathons that were based on each of the themes for participants to experiment with different ways of reusing digital cultural heritage content and to develop new ideas for reuse. We worked in the domains of film, TV, photography, dance, which is my area, museums and publishing, and supported a number of these sort of emerging business ideas, taking them through tool development with the idea that they may have the potential to enter the market. Each of those hackathons brought together a wide range of different cultural sector professionals. All of them were working very collaboratively on this work, and I think developed some very interesting ideas, and some of them have continued to generate. The eSpace portal is very much in a live space, which is where users can create their own collections of digital content on themes of your choice. And importantly, the content space on the project's website is a very important space because it's a central repository for accessing guidelines, tools and methods for managing IPR, clearing copyright and exchanging and reusing open content. And there's some of those materials I think are on the table at the back. Okay, the next project I'm going to briefly talk about is Culture Moves, because this is a project that's in progress with my colleague Rosa Cisneros, who's at the back. It's an 18 months project. It does have some connections with eSpace in the sense that some of the partners are the same. And it's led by our partner IM2. The focus is very much on reusing of cultural heritage content, again developing a series of digital tools that again focuses on reusing Europeana content wherever possible to generate new forms of touristic engagement through the intersection of dance, tourism and education. So those are the sort of strands in the work, and particularly how dance and dance content can offer users a different kind of experience of place. So far we've been working on very much a participatory basis, involving a number of different stakeholders, dance artists, dance professionals, festival organisers, dance academics and so on, through a series of lab days to ensure that all of our stakeholder community are very much foremost in the project. So that we can find out what it is that they're interested in, what they can tell us about their own experiences, their engagement with Europeana, just put it out there, and experiences more generally in reusing digital cultural content and what they would like from the digital tools. So we're developing two key tools, the Move Scrapbook by IN2, which is building on the work that we did in dance spaces and Europeana space, which is a personal digital story telling web-based tool where users can collect dance content, they can tag it and add their own personal materials to it for organising their content into theme groups and so on. And then the Moves Annotator is building on the annotation tool that our colleague Carla Fernandez at the University of Lisbon was building in Europeana space to make this a web-based application. And then our partner in Tuscany, FST, is using video mapping techniques to create a final video product using dance content provided hopefully through Europeana as a concrete example of how we can reuse Europeana content for the promotion of lesser known destinations. And again, looking at the way in which dance can reveal new aspects of a place. It may be because dance has been part of the history of the place, but it's been thus far rather hidden, or it's not something that tourists would necessarily find when they visit a place. So it's sort of bringing those two strands of activity together to enrich a visitor's experience of a place. And then finally, I just want to talk about Holo Dance, which is a project which we've just completed, a 3-year project. Which again focus very much on the idea of reusing dance content, and we created a number of different digital tools through the project, which I'm not going to dwell on, but we're working with 4 different dance genres: contemporary dance, ballet dance, flamenco, and Greek folk dance. And I'm just going to say something about the work we were doing with Greek folk dance, because Greek folk dance in a way was the most, they're all really interesting, but interesting because as a folk dance form, it hasn't documented itself in a way that makes it more available to a general public. So we were very busy with thinking about how do we capture, document this form, and do the work that we need to do to develop the digital tools with it. But thinking about what happens in this transformation from live form to digitized form, not least because it is a form that's primarily practiced by amateurs. It happens in the streets, it happens in places other than in theatrical spaces. It's of course very embedded in the local customs. It is costumed, the music is really important. So all of these ingredients really form this practice. And we were needing to work on a range of digital applications which took that form out of its natural home, if you like, into the lab space of the motion capture lab in order to capture the content. So it opened up all sorts of questions around ethics, about responsibility, and particularly then how do we take care of those people who are involved in that content contribution when they are amateurs, and what we are doing with their material and that particular content. How do we bring in some controls around the reuse of that, and what is our responsibility in that? And there are all sorts of interesting outcomes from that, because so there is just some images of it, just to give you a glimpse into it. And our wonderful partner on the project, Amalia Makatsi, who is a very well-established Greek folk dance teacher in Greece and teaches hundreds and hundreds of participants across the country in all the Greek islands. So she's very, very embedded in the Greek folk dance community, and was deeply fascinated by these processes of what happens when this material, which is very much enfleshed, embodied, comes into a very different environment. And you can see there's just a glimpse of it. This is a historical image from some of the early days at the beginning of the 20th century of the Greek folk dance schools that she's been running. Well, not her personally, but the history of that. And then a glimpse into how it often happens within the streets. And then some of those dancers now taken into the motion capture lab, and how you can see it sort of strips it of its authenticity. So there's some really interesting questions around authenticity that arise in this process of digitizing content and then making it available for reuse. And not least because our original agreements with our dancers was to not make any of the video material available, but rather to use it as source data to create the visualizations for the technical partners to work with it, to do the various tool development. And so that as a user you would come to the site and you'd be able to see the motion capture data. Now, if anybody knows motion capture data, this is not an anonymous form. But there's a whole bunch of kind of communications that need to go on when you're transmitting that sort of information through the motion capture data, and how you communicate that to the dancers and who are contributing this, who are very willing to be part of this process, which was great, and we were really happy for that. But there are stages at which that data can then become, it can let itself loose in the world in ways that you don't necessarily know. So even though the technical partners were using it in a very responsible way and building the tools that they wanted to build with this data, already on the site you could, if you wish, see the signatures, you can see the individual dancers. So there's a whole lot of interesting questions that emerge through that process of taking what is, after all, a very intangible dance practice, which has not documented itself before in this way, and then you make it available for a general user to come and reuse that data in ways that they wish to do. And the other thing to say is that when we've been presenting this work over the 3 years of the project, we've often been showing and sharing some of these snatches of video material of these very interesting Greek folk dances, and the audiences have been mostly excited about the video documentation, because the video documentation is in a way that perceived to be some of the most valuable material because it doesn't exist in any other way. So users are most keen to get hold of this video content, and it says to us some very interesting things that over time, we've been building these really, what we think are these fascinating digital applications, and in Holodance we built a number of things like a blending engine where users could blend different parts of the dance material, different searching tools. We built something to do with 3D volumetric applications, an annotation tool, and so on. So, but at the same time, what seems to win out from a user's perspective is the video. It's the video material. So despite of all these technical advances, very often it's the video content which is most attractive. So there's something in there for us which is really interesting. So through all these projects, and just to show you this last image of, again, the dancers moving from 2D to 3D. So this was one of our tools that we were able to build, is to show, and this is what when you go to the annotation page, you can't see it very well, but these are just some screen grabs from the side. So just to sum up, I think each of these projects that I've just mentioned very briefly considers the idea of reuse in different ways. Europeana Space foregrounded reuse as a way of creating a deeper level of engagement with digital cultural content, and by extension supported new applications for reusing the content which had the potential for exploitation. I know Daniel's going to share with us MooPop, which was one of the really exciting kind of unexpected in a way kind of outcomes of Europeana Space. Cultural Moves, which we're working on at the moment, emphasises participation throughout the project by bringing together a wide community of dance and tourism professionals for lab days to help steer the project, whilst building tools for reusing digital cultural content for the specific purpose of augmenting experiences of place by experiencing through place through the experience of dance and how dance enters into the place. And finally then Holodance, which focuses on different dance genres within this broad context of intangible cultural heritage, and the reuse of digitized dance content for users to experience through engaging with a number of different tools. Participation by the experts in Greek folk dance ensured greater authenticity of this intangible cultural heritage in one way, but whilst also calling into question authenticity through the necessary transformation of dance into data, precisely for developing the different digital tools. Thank you.